would first like to introduce you to Maître Marc-André Séguin. He is the co-founder and partner at Exeo Attorneys. Marc-André is a member of both Quebec and New York State Bar. He has been practicing immigration law since 2010. He has published a widely read handbook about Quebec Immigration Investors Program and has developed business relations with industry professionals in over 20 countries. In addition to mastering both civil and common law, where he graduated from McGill University, Marc-André also holds a master's in Asian legal studies from the National University of Singapore. He can speak English, French, Spanish, and is currently learning Chinese. Marc-André will speak to us today about updates from Canada, and namely business immigration paths to immigrate permanently and temporarily to Canada, including work permits for intercompany transfers, entrepreneurs, skilled immigration, permanent residency programs for entrepreneurs and innovators, and provide, obviously, as I mentioned before, a brief overview of the COVID protocols for travelers coming into Canada. Bonjour, Marc-André.
Hello, pleasure to be here. So thank you everyone for the opportunity to talk about this exciting subject today. Canadian immigration law has been through a lot of changes since March of 2020. And what we're going to do today is try to give you an overview of some of the core programs that we see in Canada as things stand today. Obviously, it's, we can't, let me see if I can share my screen here. Obviously, the purpose of today's meeting is not to give you, information about every single immigration program that exists in Canada. That would take us hours, if not days. The purpose is to give you just a core idea of what are the current, the most typical programs that we will see in use in Canada today. I'll spare you the disclaimer, but obviously whatever we discuss today does not constitute legal advice. Every situation is specific, and do make sure that you talk to a licensed advisor before undertaking any immigration plans to Canada, whether it is permanent or temporary. A bit of information about our firm. I'll let, obviously this particular presentation will be made available to everyone. If you want to learn more about who we are and what we've done, feel free to reach out to us after today's presentation. Now let's get into it. Generally speaking, under immigration law in Canada, there are three main reasons for someone to enter or to cross the border. There's either, you'll find visitors, so people who come to Canada to either visit Canada as tourists or as business visitors. You have temporary statuses as well, primarily for workers and students. We're not going to touch on study permits today. However, do know that they fit in the temporary immigration category, otherwise known as mobility. And then you have permanent immigration. So people who have a permanent intent towards Canada, who want to acquire permanent resident status and possibly eventually Canadian citizenship, which is the second step for some after becoming permanent residents or PR holders. We will start with permanent immigration. I'm going to briefly talk about two specific programs that lead to Canadian permanent residency. That being said, there are literally dozens across Canada. There are provincial programs, there are federal programs, there are categories for self-employed workers, primarily artists and athletes, as well as for entrepreneurs across the country. So it's important to know that there is a vast world of permanent residency programs beyond the two that I will present today. The first one is a federal program, otherwise known as the Canada Startup Visa, or SUV. It is a program that leads to the Canadian Green Card and is designed for entrepreneurs who are involved in an innovative business that is likely to benefit Canada's economy. The idea here being that the federal government wants to attract essentially those Silicon Valley types entrepreneurs from around the world so that they can come and develop their technology, their innovative ideas in Canada. In order to qualify for this particular program, it's important to know that no minimum investment is required. The primary element that the federal government is looking for here is a validated idea, validated by either angel investors, venture capital funds, or incubators. provided that the entrepreneur has secures the support of one of those three federally licensed organizations, whether they're angel investors, venture capital funds, or incubators, the list of which is found on a federal website. That entrepreneur will be allowed to come to Canada and launch their business. Success is not a requirement, although a good faith effort is. The applicant is required to actively manage his or her business in Canada. They may even team up with Canadians, but the important thing is that they first have the support of a federally licensed organization. In some cases, in the case of angel investors or venture capital funds, they must even secure funding from those organizations in order to qualify. The idea, again, being that these particular businesses can come and develop these new technologies and benefit Canadians as a whole. Obviously, most other immigration programs that we'll find across Canada also require very active involvement in businesses today. We will find such programs in Ontario and in certain other provinces as well. These programs are also known as provincial nominee programs. We will not discuss those today just for lack of time, but by way of comparison, I also wanted to introduce the well-known Quebec Immigrant Investor Program, very well-known in Asia, particularly in China and in Hong Kong. The reason why I am mentioning this program, even though it is currently and temporarily closed, is because this is the only passive investment program that currently exists in Canada, leading to permanent residency. Obviously, this particular program, contrary to certain other active investment programs, requires the applicant to display a very large amount of minimum net assets, management experience, as well as, and also introduces a very high investment threshold. So in order to qualify in this particular case, an applicant would have to demonstrate at least $2 million in net assets, 2 years of management experience in the last 5 years, and then make an investment, a qualified investment through the, essentially amounting to the purchase of a government issued bond for 5 years at 0% interest, the purchase of which is priced at 1.2 million Canadian dollars. However, because this is a bond-based investment, all financial institutions that are currently involved in the program, which must be licensed by the Quebec Ministry of Immigration, also offer a financing option priced at around $380,000 currently. The investment in this case is secured by a government issued bond. That's why there is a financing option available. The investment in this particular case is only required upon acceptance by the authorities, which is different from the other programs where the investment is one of the first steps of the process. It's extremely passive as well, and unfortunately is currently closed, but we are expecting further news on this program probably in the coming weeks. It's also, just like the other programs, it's a direct path to permanent residence, with the only exception that because this is a provincial program, the first step is to be approved by the province, to be selected by the province of Quebec, or otherwise nominated by the province, and then the applicant will be able to move on to permanent residency. Now, so very quick overview of the permanent residency landscape. Now we're going to be moving on to two visa categories for workers. So mobility, otherwise known as temporary immigration. The first one that we'll discuss is intracompany transferees. This is a very popular work permit. Also very popular in Hong Kong because it is not subject to consular processing. A Hong Kong applicant holding a BNO or Hong Kong passport can go strictly to the port of entry when applying for this particular work permit and bring their application at the port of entry at the airport. And provided that the application checks all the boxes, the applicant is able to leave the airport with their work permit in hand within a couple of hours. This particular for intracompany transferees, executives, managers, employees with specialized skills who have been working out of a multinational group outside of Canada for at least 12 months and are now moving to Canada in that same capacity, working for the Canadian affiliate company. The affiliate company can be a startup or an existing company, and that particular difference, whether it's a startup or an affiliate company, will also determine how long the initial visa is granted for. The company obviously must have a qualifying relationship, so we're talking about affiliate companies. The renewal of these work permits is valid for up to 7 years for managers and up to 5 years for employees with specialized skills. Another work permit category that is particularly interesting is the C11 work permit, otherwise known for a work permit that is specifically designed for entrepreneurs or self-employed candidates. In this particular case, a foreign affiliate is not required. It does not require a multinational structure. However, it does require a substantial investment on the part of the investor or entrepreneur coming into Canada, and that particular person must have a majority stake in that business. They're allowed to team up, but they must have over 50% of that particular company's shares in order to qualify for this work permit category. This particular company has to offer a significant benefit for Canadians and for the Canadian economy. That's why a substantial investment is required. That investment is not, we don't give out a specific amount, but is generally understood to be a non-marginal investment. So you can think at least $100,000 into a business in order to qualify, but that particular threshold will change depending on the particular industry that the investor is interested in. We need to show a clear business plan as well as concrete measures that were taken in the furtherance of that plan before applying for that particular work permit. It's important to know also that for several months now, the Canadian federal authorities have engaged in special measures for Hong Kong SAR and BNO passport holders. I won't go into all of those policies today, but one of the things to bear in mind is that, of course, Hong Kong SAR passport holders are visa exempt. That processing is prioritized at the moment for family reunion and study permits applications, and that some applicants holding the Hong Kong SAR or BNO passports can apply for work permits for 2 years without any regard to the physical location of the applicant. I say some because that particular open work permit option is available generally to people who currently have a work permit in Canada or who have been studying in Canada or who are relatives of Canadians, Canadian permanent residents or citizens. That particular application can be submitted online. And finally, COVID and the Canadian border, there have been a lot of policies that have changed over time. The core takeaway here is that Canada, since September 7, has opened its borders to all visitors as long as they are fully vaccinated, utilizing a vaccine that is recognized by Canadian authorities. So that refers to Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, as well as Johnson & Johnson. The traveler must have been fully vaccinated for at least 2 weeks before entering Canada. Fully vaccinated travelers are exempt from quarantine. However, they must bring a PCR test with them that was taken at least 72 hours prior to arriving in Canada. And there can be some random PCR tests upon landing in Canada for those vaccinated travelers. The only unvaccinated travelers that are currently allowed in Canada are those that are non-discretionary, that are traveling for non-discretionary reasons, mainly study permit holders, workers, permanent residents, and citizens. But their situation is about to be significantly more complicated by the fact that the federal government has announced very recently a new policy. And therefore, starting October 30, 2021, in just 2 weeks from now, any passenger on any flight or interprovincial train trip will have to be fully vaccinated before being allowed to board. That policy is likely going to be challenged in court, so we have to wait to see what happens, because one of its impacts is that it might forcibly keep unvaccinated foreign visitors in Canada against their will, because they simply will not be able to board any flight or trains. And the US border, the only land border that Canada has, will reopen in the next few weeks, starting in November, but only to vaccinated travelers. So again, we might find ourselves in Canada with several visitors who are stranded here without the ability to leave, simply because they will not be allowed to board or exit through any means of transportation. So that's likely going to be challenged. There is some that we will need to keep following up on that in the coming weeks and months. That's it from me. I look forward to answering questions, and thank you everyone for attending here today.
Thank you, Marc-André, for your presentation. It is super interesting. Maybe I'll just add one question right away. In your presentation, and I know it's a question I get asked a lot from my clients, and you mentioned that the Quebec Immigrant Investor Program is temporarily closed, but news will come. Do you know if it will be reopened by the end of this year, or maybe even in 2022?
So the latest that we've heard is that the Quebec Ministry of Immigration has in fact reached out to the 18 or so financial intermediaries that are involved in the program to set a special meeting next Wednesday on October 20. Wednesday is generally when regulations and ministerial decrees are published in the official gazette, and therefore that is no coincidence. What we expect is that there will be a formal announcement published next Wednesday prior to that specific meeting. What the announcement will be, we don't know yet. It could be that the government is just kicking the can a bit further down the road, or that the program will be reopening on a very limited basis. So we need to basically wait and see. However, we can expect at least some more news in about 7 days.
Wow, that's super exciting. Maybe just another quick follow-up question. You also mentioned that there's some special measures for Hong Kong, mainly for work permits. Is there any possibilities for residency afterwards?
Yes, so anyone who has at least 12 months of valid work experience in Canada full-time can apply for the Canadian Experience Class category under which is a federal program under which an applicant can apply through the platform Express Entry. So there is a pathway to permanent residency for workers who have accumulated sufficient full-time employment in Canada.
Perfect. Thank you so much again, Marc-André.